Hello there. It's been a while. It's been a crazy couple of months. As you all know right now, what's going on in the world is a little insane. Obviously, we are all going to get through this. Don't worry. But for the meantime, since we're all stuck at home, I thought I would make a video about 13 movies that you guys should watch while you're at home right now. Movies that either you should rewatch because I think they're underrated, or movies that you should watch for the first time because where the hell have you been for the past, I don't know how many years. But either way, these are 13 movies that you should watch over the next month or so. As you could tell from my first skit, I am a huge fan of Lord of the Rings. So my first movie, or 3 movies technically, is the Lord of the Rings trilogy. Extended edition. Watch the extended editions. Don't watch the theatrical ones. The theatrical ones are fine for what they are. If you're not into movies as much as I am, the theatrical ones are perfectly fine for you to watch. By the way, don't worry about the noise going on in the background. My sister's over with her puppy. You're gonna hear a lot of noise probably. But the extended editions, in my opinion, are my favorite movies of all time officially. I am stating this for the record right now. I actually just got done watching all 3 movies, extended by the way, with my girlfriend, and she loved them. And not only did she love them, she cried at the end of The Return of the King, which is very warranted. That movie, if you don't cry man tears by the end of that movie, you are not a man.
I can't carry it for you, but I can carry you. Come on!
All right, if you don't cry, that I'm officially saying that right now. If you do not cry at the end of Return of the King, you are not a man. You are not a human being. You do not have a soul. The second movie in my 13 movies is coincidentally another Peter Jackson film, King Kong. Now, this movie is not as good, obviously, as the Lord of the Rings trilogy. But do I still think it is a great movie that needs to be watched and rewatched at least a couple of times a year? Absolutely. Save for the dinosaur chase scene that is really CGI heavy and it looks a little bit outdated nowadays, this movie is phenomenal in my opinion. I think the characters are great. I think the direction is great. I think the story is great, obviously, and it really amps the original story of what King Kong was back in the 1930s. Next up, we've got Kingdom of Heaven. Again, watch the director's cut. The theatrical cut is shit. I'm sorry, pardon my French, but it is. This movie, the director's cut, is 3 hours and 15 minutes with an intermission and an overture, but it is an absolute masterpiece that if you watched it from start to finish in one sitting, I guarantee you will love this. This movie, I don't even know how to describe it. I mean, it is just absolutely phenomenal in every single sense of the word. I think, in my opinion, I think it's better than Gladiator. This is a Ridley Scott film. Ridley Scott directed Gladiator, and I think this is a better film. The director's cut of this film is better than the theatrical cut of Gladiator, which won Best Picture of that year. I think this movie, if it came out, the year that it came out, the director's cut, it would have won Best Picture, no doubt. Next up, we got a little bit more of a different film, but it's Finding Nemo. This is my all-time favorite animated film. It's my favorite Disney film. It's my favorite Pixar film. It's my favorite Disney Pixar film. I'm not sure if there's an actual difference between a Disney Pixar film and a Disney film, or if there is ever actually a film where it's just Pixar. But anyway, this is my favorite Disney Pixar film. It's my favorite animated film of all time. By the way, this steelbook, if you can see, is absolutely amazing. It's so cool. Excuse my family, by the way. It's very loud. Obviously, we're in this house together and we're trying to make the best of it. But very cool. You got the 4K right there. It's very awesome. I love it so much. This movie is very personal to me. I love the ocean. I love the beach. And I used to watch this movie all the time when I was a kid. And it brings me back to a time where I didn't have any worries. You know, the soundtrack by Thomas Newman is absolutely beautiful, which is coincidentally the same conductor and music producer or whatever of Shawshank Redemption. And you can definitely tell there are some melodies and some of that where you can watch the movie and you can go, that could be in Shawshank Redemption, and vice versa, where you watch the Shawshank Redemption and you could say that could be in Finding Nemo. But anyway, yeah, this is definitely one. No, it is, like I said, my favorite animated film, Disney Pixar film. Absolute masterpiece in every single way, in my opinion. I just watch this film, rewatch it. It'll make you happy, I promise. Next up, we got Gladiator. Now, I know what you're thinking. I just went over Kingdom of Heaven, and I said that that movie was better than this one. I still think that. Do I still think this movie is great? Obviously, I do. If you've never seen this movie, what are you doing? This movie is fantastic. Especially on 4K, this movie looks amazing. Russell Crowe is obviously fantastic in it. Joaquin Phoenix is absolutely amazing in it. He plays such a dirty, gritty villain, and I love it so much. He's such a great actor. The story is great, although it is a very, not predictable, but it is kind of like that, you know, that underdog story where you can kind of see where it's going, but it does, in my opinion, have an ending that most people probably didn't predict. And so that's why I think it's great. In terms of story and action and character development, I think this movie is fantastic, and if you haven't seen it yet, go watch it right now. You have the time to it, you might as well. The next movie I'm going to be talking about briefly is Everybody Wants Some. This movie is directed by Richard Linklater, who is the director of School of Rock and Dazed and Confused. And this movie, for some reason or whatever, kind of got forgotten about. Nobody talks about this movie. And I think this is his best movie, in my opinion. It's basically, if you've seen Dazed and Confused, which is obviously more popular than this, it's basically a Dazed and Confused in the 80s. But I think he does it better. I think the character is a little bit more realized than in Dazed and Confused. Now, don't get me wrong, I still love Dazed and Confused. That movie is amazing. But this movie, I just think, is a little bit better. It's hilarious. It's surprisingly heartfelt. There are so many little moments throughout this movie where it kind of makes you think back in retrospect of the story, but also like your own life in a way. It gives you a lot of life lessons, but also makes you crack up. This movie makes me crack up every single time I watch it. I've seen it at least 4 or 5 times.
My friends, we're gonna try to move your feet. See, I am one to Finn, and I'd like to say hello. Say hello, Finn. To the black, to the white, the red, and the brown, the purple, and yellow. First, I gotta bang, bang, a boogie to the boogie, say don't jump the boogie to the bang, bang, boogie. Let's rock. You don't stop. Rock the rhythm that'll make your body rock. Now.
And I might rewatch it within the next week or so. So yeah, watch this one. This next one's a twofer. The Shining and Doctor Sleep. Watch The Shining before you watch Doctor Sleep, obviously, since Doctor Sleep is the sequel. The Shining in itself is my favorite horror film of all time, and in my opinion, it's the greatest horror film of all time. I think it is what every horror film should strive to be in terms of story and ambiance and, you know, everything. I think this is a perfect horror film in my opinion. And Doctor Sleep is one of the greatest sequels of all time. I freaking loved this movie to death. I watched it in theaters and I never wanted it to end. I remember when the credits rolled up, I was like genuinely sad because I didn't want it to end. But I was like also happy because it was such a good follow-up to The Shining. And also, it didn't receive that much money in the box office, which is surprising because it has like an A-list cast to it. And it's got one of my favorite directors working today in horror, Mike Flanagan. So right now is the time to go and buy this movie, either on Vudu or on digital or whatever. And go and support it right now is the time, whatever. It is absolutely phenomenal. Watch the director's cut if you can. The theatrical one, in my opinion, is amazing too, but the director's cut adds a little bit more. It's like divided into chapters, and it even says like chapter 1, chapter 2 throughout the movie. The theatrical one is 2.5 hours, and the director's cut is 3 hours. So if you have 3 hours to spare, go for the director's cut. It's amazing. Now, this next one is an interesting one because I feel like it's an unpopular opinion, but the next one is Pirates of the Caribbean 2: Dead Man's Chest. In my opinion, this is the best Pirates of the Caribbean film. I know, a lot of people say that the first one is the best, but I think this is better. I really do, and I've rewatched the first one and the second one. The third one has a lot of problems. I don't think that's good as the first two. I will say that. But the second one, in my opinion, is better than the first one. I think it's one of those sequels where it actually improved upon the first one in terms of like Empire Strikes Back to Star Wars and, Terminator 2 to the first Terminator and, all those great sequels that like improved upon the first one. This one, I think, improved upon the first one. I don't know. It's one of those things where I watch it and I just think everything about it is just so much more fun. It's a lot more dark. It's a lot darker than the first one, in my opinion. It's got a lot of interesting. It plays on some of the tropes of a lot of adventure films, where it's like, most pirate adventure films are looking for like a treasure and gold, but in this one they're looking for a heart, like the heart of Davy Jones. And Davy Jones is one of my favorite villains of all time because his story is tragic, where he fell in love with a girl and she betrayed him and he sold his soul, and now he's like on the sea forever. And it's like, his character is amazing in this movie. And I just think this is one of the greatest sequels of all time, in my opinion. I think it's very underrated. And if you don't think that, maybe this is the time to rewatch it. Exactly. This is what this video is about. You know what I mean? So, if you haven't seen any of the Pirates of the Caribbean movies, watch the first one, obviously, and watch this one, and let me know what you think about it. Now, this next one is another interesting one. Not a lot of people talk about it. Actually, hardly anybody talks about this movie, to be honest. I heard about it first time over on Chris Duckman's YouTube channel, where he talked about it over his Halloween special. And that is Lake Mungo. Now, you want to talk about a movie that I watched for the first time around Halloween a couple months ago. And usually scary movies, horror movies don't like actually scare me. I just love the way, like, if they're directed really well and I'm like, that was awesome, and they directed it really well and it was, creepy, but it wasn't like horrifying and I couldn't sleep for the next couple days. You want to talk about a movie that actually like scared me to my core and like actually kind of tormented me in a way? It's this movie. I can't explain it. You just have to watch it. It's only an hour and a half. It's probably like, I think on Vudu it's like $10. Maybe that's when I bought it, but then my girlfriend graciously bought it for me for graduating college a couple months ago on physical disc. Well, I say physical disc because it's not on Blu-ray. One of my favorite horror films of all time is not on Blu-ray. It's only on DVD, and it's on this After Dark Horror Fest 4. This movie deserves more than that. Let me tell you. It revolves around a girl who drowns, and her family is grieving over it, which is one of the greatest things about this movie, is that this family is grieving over the loss of their child, and her brother is grieving over the loss of his sister. And so not only is it like horrifying in that aspect, but it's also horrifying in the fact that like they're starting to take pictures and videos around their house, and she's starting to show up in the background of all their pictures and videos, and this kind of mystery goes, starts to go forward and everything. And so Yeah, this movie still terrifies me to this day. I've watched it, I think, 2 or 3 times ever since last October. And yeah, some of the visuals in this movie are burned into my memory. So have fun watching this one. Next up is The Lighthouse. Now, if you've seen my review of this movie, you know how much I love this movie, but I want to reiterate how much I love this movie. I've watched it 2 or 3 times since I brought it home on Blu-ray, and it just keeps on getting better and better with each viewing. It's one of those movies where you watch it for the first time, you're not really sure what to think of it, and then you watch it for a second time and you pick up on a couple of things that you didn't notice the first time, and then you watch it for a third time and you continue to pick up on things that you didn't really notice the first or second time, and it just gets better and better with each viewing. Robert Pattinson has never been better. Willem Dafoe has never been better. If you've never seen this movie, go watch it right now. But if you've seen this movie, this is your chance to go rewatch it again. Even if you didn't like it the first time, give it a rewatch. Maybe you'll actually watch it, or maybe actually like it. Or if you liked it the first time, maybe this is a chance for you to rewatch it again and even continue to like it again. Now, this next film, I've been made fun of a couple times for it being one of my favorite films of all time, and that is Titanic. I don't care. I love this film. I think James Cameron directed the hell out of this movie. It is one of those typical love stories like Romeo and Juliet. I mean, hell, even James Cameron went into the producers and said, I want to make Romeo and Juliet on the Titanic, and they were like, yep, you go for it. And he did, and the result is one of the greatest films of all time. Whether you like it or not, this is one of the most technically amazing films that has ever been made. I mean, on a soundtrack stance, it's absolutely beautiful. On a technical stance, it is phenomenal. I mean, the visual effects of this movie were groundbreaking for the time, and a lot of them, most of them, look absolutely phenomenal even today. I mean, there are a couple of CGI shots that look a little bit, iffy, but it's like they're away in like 2 seconds and it's like you hardly even notice them. But for the most part, it's all practical effects and they look absolutely phenomenal. So I'm just putting this in there because it's one of my favorite movies of all time. Rewatch it if you want to or not, whatever. But I highly suggest that you watch this over the next couple weeks. Now, I have my favorite Disney Pixar film of all time, which is obviously Finding Nemo. I've already talked about that, but I have what, in my opinion, is the most underrated Disney film of all time, and that is Treasure Planet. Treasure Planet, in my opinion, is one of the most funnest, is that a word? I don't care. Is one of the most funnest animated movies of all time, in my opinion. I think this movie just captures that adventure, kind of like Pirates of the Caribbean, but more for kids. It just has a sense of adventure, like literally, and it has such a great soundtrack by James Newton Howard that you just can't help but smile when you watch it. I mean, it's such a fun movie that I don't think gets enough credit. I mean, I really don't. I don't understand why people don't talk about this movie more often. Now, I will say that there are talks of, one, this getting a live-action remake, which I'm usually not on the side of live-action remakes when it comes to these Disney films. But in terms of this one, because it's so underrated, in my opinion, I kind of want it to get a live action remake because then I want people to appreciate the story behind it. The fact that it is Treasure Island, but it's like in space and you have freaking pirate ships in space and they're flying around to planet and it's just like, it's the ultimate adventure and I just love it. And I think it's worth a rewatch, or if you've never seen it, like I've said multiple times in this video, give it a watch. I think it's very, very much a very fun film, and I think it's on Disney Plus. I'm pretty sure it is. So if you have Disney Plus, it's already there. Go give it a watch. But yeah, I just think it's such a fun film, and I think it's very underrated, and I think it deserves a little bit more credit than it does. So yeah, those are my 13 films that I think you should watch over the next month or month and a half or whatever. I think they're all great in my opinion, or at least underrated. Oh my god, I have so many movies, it's ridiculous. But I hope you guys are staying safe. I hope you guys are washing your hands and using hand sanitizer and using Lysol and everything like that. We will get over this, trust me. I know we will. But for the meantime, thanks for watching.